Let's continue into our fourth session that we have ahead of us as we think about how to increase your leadership capacity. And this third step is capacity building. Step number 3, identify your leadership ceiling. So we started by saying, know who you are, what you're made for. The second was, we said, make sure that you're plugged into those 4 resources, those Father resources from God, and passing them on. But the third thing you need to do is identify where you're pushing up against your leadership ceiling, because probably you are. Leadership ceilings are interesting things. There are thousands of ways that people could grow, but every leader has a growing edge that's most critical. In other words, you could grow in this or that, but there's probably a spot where growth is the most significant. A growth in that area would actually help you move forward. If you can grow in this area, it will immediately increase your leadership impact, while growth in other areas could be an unnecessary distraction. How do you identify your growing edge? What is the nature of your personal leadership ceiling? And how can you focus leadership growth into the area that will make the biggest difference for you? Because that would increase your leadership capacity. And one of the ways you find that is just picturing that in 2 years from now, your ministry is twice as fruitful, maybe twice as large, twice as fruitful is the most important part. Twice as fruitful. And this will probably feel impossible. You probably think that can't be possible. And your answer will most likely fit into 2 common categories. The first one we find in Mark 9:37, where Jesus says the harvest is plentiful. The harvest is plentiful, but he said hold on just a second. Let me go back. I'm thinking, Jacob, why don't you keep bringing those people in? I see that there's some people coming, and I want to make sure they don't miss out, so I'll invite them in. Harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So you're probably going to be thinking, well, we could be a lot more fruitful, but we need more people. We need more people. Or in Mark 6, the disciples come to Jesus and they said, there's a lot of people that need to be fed. And he said, well, you feed them. And they said, Master, we don't have enough money. It would take a year's wages to feed those people. And then he said, what do you have? Often as we think about things growing, we say, we could grow if I had more people, if I had more money. And then the third thing that's not in these verses, but maybe implied, if we had more time, right? If I had more people, if I had more money, or if somehow I had more time, then I can grow. But people are limited. Money, we never have enough of. Time, it's a fixed item. But we need to ask the question, what leadership changes in you could open the way for increased fruitfulness on your team? What leadership energy changes in you? Now, I remember I've had a lot of places where I've come up against my leadership ceiling. I kind of got stuck there. By the way, leadership ceilings work in such a way where, for instance, one of them was when our team couldn't sit in a circle anymore. And I went, how can I lead a group when there's not space for us to hear from everyone and everyone can't share? That was just incomprehensible for me. And then I remember when our team got to 30, and I went, how in the world can you lead a group bigger than 30? Some of you are pastors. And what you'll notice is your church will grow to a certain size, and then it will just kind of stagnate. It'll stop. Often churches grow to 80, or they grow to 120, 150, maybe even to 200, and then they just stop. And you trace back in time, and there'll be people come in and people leave. You'll have staff come in and staff leave. You'll add a couple activities, and then they'll fall. And it's like there's this invisible ceiling that keeps pushing you back down. Now, at that point, the tendency is always just to push a little bit harder, give it more energy, or the other tendency is just keep doing the same thing as you're doing and hope that sometime it's going to change. Our church is 120, let's just keep being faithful. It's been 120 for the last 10 years, but maybe another 10 years of faithfulness will do something. I don't know what. But in order to see what you've never seen, you have to do what you've never done. Leadership ceilings actually require a change in how we're leading, a change in how we're applying our energy. We can't just do the same thing and expect different results. In fact, someone said every system is perfectly designed to achieve the results it's currently achieving. So our team of 30 was perfectly designed to to peak out at 30, if we didn't change somehow the way I was leading, the way we were going about things, that natural limit was going to be there. We were getting the results that we should be getting with the way that we were going about it. Or Albert Einstein said this. He said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I think lots of Christian leaders, and sometimes what we do is our excuse is we're being faithful, right? It's interesting, though, the passage of the talents says the servant that doesn't see increase is not a faithful servant. God entrusts us with something and he wants his kingdom to grow. But we think, I'll just keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect that something will change. There's probably an area that when I ceiling out that I need to grow in, or I need to change what I'm doing. Sometimes what works for a certain season stops working because it was designed to be optimized at that particular phase of growth. And when we move beyond it, it doesn't work anymore. In fact, maybe it works against us. I can put 10 people in a circle, but when I put 100 in a circle, it's chaos. It's wonderful for 10. It's terrible for 100. A way of leading works well when it's small and stops working when it gets larger. So there may be an area where you need to change the way you're leading. You need to grow, or there may be a particular leadership habit that's holding you back. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how you experience your leadership ceiling. You see this guy kind of pushing up against the ceiling. That's how I feel. I've run into a number of leadership ceilings in my life, so I can tell you how they feel. I had one just this last fall that I'm going to tell you about in a bit, and they're painful. You just kind of push and it's not fun. Here's how you experience it. Well, I've got them written down. I don't have them written down here, so they're down in your notes. It's like a car when you're going too high in one gear. The engine starts to whine. The more gas doesn't add any speed. The car starts to shake, and you feel under increasing pressure and stress. Have you ever you're in second gear and you try to go too fast? You press down on the gas and you accelerate for a bit, and then no more gas, increased gas doesn't make you go any faster. And the whole, you get that whine, the car's shaking, it just doesn't feel right. And there's this pressure on everything. Now, if you push in the clutch and shift into a different leadership gear, all of a sudden that same energy, you have more space, things settle down. But that leadership ceiling will feel like that whine, like, I just got to push. I got to give it more energy. You believe you either need to push harder or lower your expectations. Some people, they just try to work longer hours, push their people harder, or just say, hey, churches in Central and Eastern Europe, they're not designed to have more than 80 people. So let's just lower our expectations. Or I should never lead more than 4. I don't like to lead more than 4. We lower our expectations and settle there because the pressure of trying to get past our leadership ceiling is really uncomfortable. Growth starts to plateau, and you'll find periods of quick growth, and then it's just stopping. Everything's right there. Chronic problems are not resolved. So you'll find that you're dealing with something this year and you're still dealing with the same situation next year. You can't seem to get that chronic problem fixed. People around you experience frustration or resignation because there's no change. So too long at a leadership ceiling, and you'll find people around you will start losing their hope, and they'll say, we're all stuck behind your leadership ceiling. Maybe I need to go somewhere else to get out from under your leadership ceiling. Or they're just frustrated, or they'll just resign. They just say, well, nothing will ever change. He won't change. She won't change. That's just the way it is. And you're often aware of this problem or limitation, but feel that the situation is not possible or is out of your control. I'd love to change it, but I can't. I'd love to change it if we had more people, if we had more money, if we had no time, but I can't. And so you tend to give excuses. You might say, well, it's different in our country. The Czech Republic is the most atheist country on earth. Well, that's the reason why I have this leadership ceiling. Or Poles are stubborn, so that's the reason. Or our Germans they're just too organized, so that's the reason that I have this problem. And so we can start to blame our surroundings and feel like that it's kind of out of our control. Well, here's some questions that will help you discover what's causing your leadership ceiling. What are the repeating problems you see in and around you as you lead? So what just keeps repeating kind of these themes like, oh, we've seen that. Oh, we see that again. Oh, that same thing is happening again. Same thing is again. And where are you experiencing the greatest frustration and stress in your leadership? Because when you're up against your leadership ceiling, it will be stressful for you and you will be frustrated. I just don't have enough time. I can't get that done. How come this problem is not getting solved? Here's another one. What are repeating themes you hear from your coworkers as they talk to you or they talk about you? Because they're going to repeat this. There are particular areas that they wish you would grow in, and they don't see you growing there. And so they'll probably talk about it. There'll be themes that will be going around. You get reputations about certain things. If we asked your spouse, your husband or your wife, what they wish you could change or grow in, what would they say? By the way, you need to ask this question every now and then. I just ask my wife, Connie, what do you wish I would grow or change in? And then try not to get defensive as she talks about that, because she knows, and I can be quick to make excuses. Well, that's just because of this. That's just because this has been a difficult time. Well, that's just because there's spiritual warfare. And I don't stop to say, I wonder how I could be leading differently and in a way that would push past this particular leadership ceiling. What area of growth would make the biggest single difference in your fruitfulness 1 year from now? Like if I could just wave a magic wand and you could just grow in some area. And a year later, that one area of growth would make a big difference. What would that particular thing be? Well, actually, before I go into general observations about leadership ceilings, let me tell you just a little bit about transforming Tim again. And I won't show his picture up here, but I can remember my first leadership coaching meeting with transforming Tim. Tim was moving out of local youth ministry and sensed God's call to train youth leaders across his country. And so he said, Dave, could you coach me? And actually, I've been coaching him for a period of 3 years. So I just really love this guy. He's been growing like crazy. And so we had our first meeting, and we met in a KFC and sat there. And for about 3 hours, I just asked him questions. And these were some of the questions I asked him. What are repeating problems you see? Where are you experiencing the greatest frustration or stress? What repeating themes do you hear from people who work with you? If I asked your spouse, I asked him just lots of questions. And at the end of that time, I said, okay, Tim, we're going to work on 3 things. Because I heard these themes over and over again. I didn't even have to look at his leadership to sense these things. He basically told them to me. I said, here's the first thing. You have a pattern of overextension. You take on too much, and then you get tired, and then you get worn out, and then you can't make strategic decisions, and then your wife gets frustrated with you, and then people don't want to follow you, and then you get unhealthy. He would often overextend himself and get sick. He didn't take care of himself. He would run hard and then crash. And that was actually creating a leadership ceiling because it was hard for him to empower others. They looked at him. It's no one wants to follow a tired leader. No one wants to be like a burned out leader. The stress of a leader who's overextended spills into those around him, and it pushes them away instead of drawing them close. So I said, we've got to build healthy habits where you're not constantly overextended. I said, that's the first thing. Second thing is I said, team. Because Tim had done a fabulous job at local ministry, which he could handle all by himself. He tended to be better at everything that he did than people around him. But because of that, he wasn't empowering his team. He was doing the work because he could do it better, and he could do it faster, and it was faster than building a team. It was faster than teaching a team. And so basically the ministry would top out at the limit of his time and energy. And he wasn't scaling back and spending more time equipping and building his team, actually slowing down to speed up. So I said, the second thing we're going to do is we're going to work on your team. And the third thing is I said, we're going to work on the recipe. And he said, what do you mean the recipe? I said, well, you know how to do ministry in your local church, but you know, it just comes out of you. You do it naturally. You've done it for many years and you just feel it. It's intuitive. I said, but to multiply into others and help other youth ministries around the country, you're going to have to take what you know intuitively and turn it into recipes. It's like a good cook that just goes a little bit of sugar, a little bit of flour, and they just feel it and it works. I said, but for someone else who's learning, you have to to come up with the recipe that's easy to follow, that you could teach to others, that would help youth workers who were early in their ministry have the same kind of fruitful ministry as you did. I said, these three are three new things, or three areas of growth for you that you're going to have to push forward in. Now, one of the things that is great about identifying your leadership ceiling is it helps you know what to focus on. So Tim said, you're absolutely right. Okay, I don't know how to change in those areas. By the way, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you grow in your growing edge? How do you make progress on your leadership ceiling? But he, in the next 2 years, focused on those three things, and actually they're behind us now. We're focusing on other things now because Tim's leadership has transformed, and he's built a team. He's living a balanced life right now. He's not overextended. He has built a recipe for good youth ministry for the age group that he's focused on, and is spreading it across the country. And he's leading at an entirely different level with less stress. Now, I remember when I was topped out at 30 staff. Oh my, how in the world could there be any more? And then found out later that we had double or triple that amount of staff, and I was actually less stressed because I was leading in a different way. It's hard to picture that. Hard to picture that a leadership gear shift would actually allow me to handle more of what God wants to trust me, and maybe be more healthy at the same time. Not sacrifice my health, not sacrifice my walk with God or my family. But I think that's the way God wants to work. He works in ways where he accomplishes his purposes and blesses us and other people at the same time. Now, here's a couple general observations about leadership ceilings, and you have these in your notes. Sometimes they're ceilings because we're unaware of them. We may not know about our impact on other people, or may not know about our deficiency in a certain area, and because of that, it's really stopping us. Sometimes they're ceilings because we have no idea how to overcome them. When someone else talks to us about these ceilings, we often make excuses or give explanations. Well, I'm overextended because of this. Well, I don't have a team because there's no one who's interested. Well, people don't want recipes. They just need to learn to do it intuitively like I did. People make excuses and they never get past their leadership ceilings. And in many cases, we've lost hope that there could be change because ceilings create natural resistance. It's hard to overcome. I told you about transforming Tim. And by the way, I'm talking about Tim and Luke. And like I said, any of us, I've been Luke. I've been limited Luke. So all of us have been in these shoes. So I'm talking about all of us. But let me tell you something about limited Luke. Limited Luke is actually not very disciplined and follow through. And many times he said, this is what I need to do. This is where I need to change. And about 3 days later, he's off track. He's not doing it anymore. He's easily distracted, and he's not equipping others. And so what happens is his ministry tops out at the limitations of his time and energy because people around him are not equipped. And he's not releasing others into gifting that he doesn't have. So rather than saying, oh, you can do that better than me, go ahead. I'm behind you. I'm giving this to you. It actually stops at the limits of his gifting. He's not honing or leveraging his best contribution. He's not using his relational ability, which is amazing, to fuel others who then will do work that he's not good at. He's not leveraging his strengths into helping others in ways that they then are willing to cover his weaknesses. And he's not investing in being better at his best contribution. He's a good teacher. He could become an outstanding teacher, but he tends to prepare late because he's so busy and distracted by other things. He's stuck at his leadership ceiling. And you would find that if you talk to him about that, he would be very aware of it. He would describe it to you. But if you asked him and you said, Luke, could you change in that area? He'd say, oh, I'd love to, but I've got a young family, and you can't do it at this stage of life. Or he would say, I would love to equip others, but people are not interested in being equipped. They're all too busy. Or he would say, I've tried that and it didn't work. And I know I need to be more disciplined, but I'm just not that way. Or he would say, I don't know how. He has lots of excuses about his leadership ceiling. So rather than focusing in on those key areas of growth like Tim did, transforming Tim, Luke is kind of caught in powerlessness And because of that, he's still at the same leadership ceiling he was several years ago. So there, actually, I had these pictures, Limited Luke and Transforming Tim, that I could tell you about. So, and Limited Luke and Transforming Tim, that's all of us. Well, here's the exercise I want you to do right now. So we're going to come back and say, how do you actually make progress on those leadership ceilings? But it'll be difficult to make progress until you identify them. So I'm going to give you some time to identify your leadership ceiling. And again, you're going to say, I don't have enough time to identify this. There's not enough space. You're going to want to put off my assignment and do it later. And let me tell you, if you don't do the work of this, you're not going to make the progress. So look at the 5 leadership ceiling questions and pray for the Holy Spirit to guide you and give you insight. Psalm 139 says, 23 and 24 says, search my heart, test my thoughts, see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the path everlasting. So, have the Lord do his searchlight work. And then write down your best description of your current leadership ceiling in no more than 3 sentences. So just write down. I told you with Tim, we said 3 things. It's your leadership ceiling right now. We wrote down those things. And becoming aware of your leadership ceiling can move you from being a victim who's trapped and powerless to change to an agent, one who has the ability to adapt, act, or move. The first thing is you need to see it. You need to focus in on it. We're going to talk in a minute about how do you raise that ceiling. But you need to know what your ceiling is that you need to raise, and then be willing to actually give it some attention, focus in on it. So again, think about, what would my spouse tell me? What am I hearing from my team? Where am I feeling frustrated? Go back through your notes. And I'm going to give you about, let's see how much time I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you about 7 minutes. So I'll come back in about 7 minutes from now. And then we're going to talk about what do you do about them. But it'll be difficult for you to do anything about them if you haven't really discerned what they are. So take this time right now to think about your leadership ceiling, write it out. And then we'll come back and say, how do you actually increase that, push that out? Break through that leadership ceiling for yourself. Okay, I'm back with you now. So I don't know how that's been for you. Looking at your leadership ceilings, that can be hard work, huh? Not the funnest thing. And by the way, I also been looking at the questions you put in. Several of these we'll come back to at the end. There'll be more time for questions at the end. But a couple of these are good, and I want to address them right now. And before we continue on, someone said, and keep putting your questions in, so we'll get back to them. But someone said, if we're lowest in pleasure, how can we address this and grow? And one of the things I would recommend is if you want to spend more time thinking about these areas, I'd really recommend you getting my book, because I talk there more in depth about each of the areas and then about some of the things that block us from pleasure. And sometimes what happens is we've received and believed lies. Often it's the imprint of our earthly dads in a way that kind of filters out the truth of how God sees us. So there's a combination of removing the things that are blocking God's pleasure and our experience of God's pleasure, and then focusing in on receiving. It's kind of the emptying of the things that are in the way, and then opening up the channels as we really begin to study how he views us. And that's something I cover in my book, so go much more in depth in that. So I just encourage you, if you want to go deeper into these, this whole study of God's Father heart has been hugely transformational to my leadership, and I just would encourage you to go deeper in that. And then someone said, Dave, could you share a little bit more about the idea that even developing yourself and getting training can be used to substitute something that only God can give you? I agree with that, but I'd like to hear a bit more from you. Well, one of the things I don't want you to hear that we can't grow in areas that we're naturally not strong in. I think someone who's not good at administration can always grow in administration. Someone who's not good at teaching can always grow in teaching. You just won't grow near as much as if you focus on the areas that you're strong. So often we see areas of non-strength as maybe being morally bad. Now, if I'm undisciplined, that's a character issue, and I need to grow in that. If I'm not gifted as a teacher, that is how God made me, and I need to recognize that and maybe focus in on the areas where I am more gifted. So I believe that we can increase in any area, but some areas take lots of energy to get a little bit of increase. And then there's other areas where if we just would invest more in them, they're in our strengths, and we could take it much further. So typically you'll have more impact by focusing most of your development ministry energy into your strengths, and then relying on others in your areas of weaknesses and let them serve you. So I hope I answered that question. And then there's a good one that I want to come back to. And then what is your growing edge? What do you mean by that? What I mean by that is there are things that you already know how to do that maybe you could do more of, but there's often a spot where let's say when you're in school, you learn basic math, and then you learn algebra, and then you learn, and your growing edge is the edge where you're pushing into the new areas of your life. And so it's the place where the growing edge is the place that's next in your growth, and it's the place where growth would make the biggest difference. Like if you could learn and grow in this area, it would make the biggest difference. Some areas maybe growth won't make much of a difference, but your growing edge is that spot where if you moved forward in that, it would actually make a huge difference in your leadership potential. And then someone said in that last part, you said in many cases we've lost hope that there could be change. How do we get that hope back? Well, I'm gonna talk about that in a minute. I think it is really important to get that hope back. In Corinthians, Paul says, when he talks about love, he gets to the end and he says, now these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. And he goes on to say the greatest of these is love. But I think about that triad of faith, hope, and love, and how those three have got to remain. Like whatever else we're losing, let's not lose faith, hope, and love. And so if you're losing hope and you're losing faith, and if you're losing love, it's really a problem. But if you're losing hope and you're losing your faith, it's really important to get those back, because without hope and without faith, we actually stop.